Everybody, this is Perch, and I'm responding to some comments that have been made in the last. I can't tell exactly when this interview was done. Here's the thing, by the way, about a lot of comic news right now. When you're seeing an interview, the interview that you're reading, it can be months old. Like there was, I mean, you see little bits of it. It's creating confusion. There's an interview with Hickman about a week before the Entertainment Weekly article where he basically revealed he's walking away from the X-Men titles about a week before, where it's talking about some of his big plans, as if, and it kind of sounded like he was starting to walk away, but it was, I mean, and the interview was clearly done like 3 months ago. And I think that's true of a lot of these interviews right now. A lot of them are old and dated, so it's a little bit hard to kind of see what's going on. At any rate, responding to some of the virtual Comic Con comic panel videos, and there's one with the X Office. I forget who all was it. It was I think Liam Williams was there, Vita Ayala was there, Ben Percy, Jerry Duggan, and somebody I'm forgetting was there. I can't remember who it was Jordan White. It was Jordan White, the moderator. That's who it was. But there were some comments made during that one, and some comments made during another one, and the comments were the same to the point where it felt like there was a talking point that was kind of distributed to a bunch of the writers that were going to be doing these. And the talking point was basically that, we need to see ourselves in the hero. Now, the context behind that was to talk about doing more kind of realistic storylines. And I'm not going to belabor the point again. I think everybody knows how I feel about it. But that, in addition to seeing the X-Men or Batman or whoever it might be, fight the Joker or fight the Marauders or fight plants, whatever they happen to be after. That you also expected as a reader to hit with your audience. You as a customer wanted to see the character fight threats you could relate to. So you can't really relate to fighting the Joker. I mean, I hope not. I don't know. Maybe some of you, but probably not. You can't really relate to that. But what you can relate to is, climate change or a school shooting or something along those lines, something more ripped from today's headlines. And it was important to be able to relate to the heroes. And that's a line that kept coming up. It's important that our customers and the writers, important for the writers themselves, that we can relate to our heroes. And I want to challenge that a little bit. That's a purpose of this video. Do you as a reader, a customer, or a creator, do you need to relate to the people you're writing? It's a fashionable thing to say, like, I really got into the head of this character. But are you really getting into the head of the character? If you're writing, say Wolverine, and Wolverine is, like back in the day when Claremont would write Wolverine and Colossus and Nightcrawler and Storm, very different personalities, very different characters. Am I led to believe that Chris Claremont saw himself in all of those characters? When Hickman wrote Namor being an a-hole to Black Panther and to some of the things that were done in the Time Runs Out storyline, am I led to believe that some part of Hickman could see himself committing mass world genocide of different reality planets? Is that something that he could see? I feel like this is one of those statements that is said in order to help the writer or help the creator feel intellectual about the properties they're doing, but it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of kind of real life or in terms of actually enjoying the story. If you're going to have the Fantastic Four go up against Galactus, if you're going to have Bruce Wayne Batman fight for his life against Bane, if you're going to have the Authority take out various kind of Avenger clones, do you need to? Is it true that the writer has to see themselves in these characters? That the heroism, the whatever they're trying to do, is relatable? I think that it's relatable in the sense that you have somebody who dresses up in spandex and goes out and fights a homicidal maniac who's intent on destroying the city, stealing all the money, and watching it all burn. I think you could relate to the basic good versus evil construct of somebody is doing a bad thing, the good guy is going to try and stop them. I think that makes sense. But if we're trying to change the story to make the heroic actions actually fit something that we might do in our real life, I think that to me that speaks more to a lack of imagination than anything else. I don't think that speaks to being in touch with kind of your inner self or writing in a relatable way. I think that speaks to, you know, kind of like what I said, it just speaks to a lack of imagination. It speaks to somebody who is struggling to think of a big threat. And I find that weird. I'm not trivializing. Obviously, I love comics. I've read thousands and thousands of comics. I absolutely love them. I love all different types of villains, from like the super creepy evil doctor in Mark Millar's The Authority to the various threats that came about in Nancy Collins' Swamp Thing, to all these different characters. But generally speaking, the mood of a story, the crux of there's a threat and it has to be resolved in some way. I don't think that threat needs to be relatable. Otherwise, how would there would be no Jack Kirby cosmic universe. There would be no Galactus. There would be no Annihilus from the Negative Zone. There would be none of this. There would you couldn't, if Jack Kirby had to basically make all the threats relatable to him. Pretty much every comic would have been fighting Nazis and then fighting some kind of various gangs in New York and occasional punks who wanted to call him out. That would be every comic. Be kind of like the Thing. The Thing is just walking around clubbering on people, but with no villains. I think that the more that stories attempt to get explained, the more that stories people try and make stories sound more intellectual or like high art. With we want to have it relatable to the reader. To me, it almost feels like we get less relatable to the reader. A lot of storylines, like not to pick on it again, but if you're just average customer in, I don't know, you're living in Chicago and you pick up Nightwing, is it relatable that your hero inherited $1 billion and is now setting up, charities? Is that relatable? I mean, certainly you could, look around the city, you could pick up a newspaper, you could find other people who are doing the same thing, but is that relatable to you as a reader? Is that somehow more relatable than Nightwing has to fight Mr. Freeze for some reason and it's a fight for his life? Both, I think, to most people are entirely foreign. And this is, yes, it's true. There isn't in planet Earth a guy who is dresses up in a Sub-Zero costume and freezes people and steals money from banks and has a frigid wife back home. Well, maybe some people have that last one, but generally speaking, most people, that is an impossibility. That doesn't exist. And it is possible that one day, through some kind of miraculous events, you could inherit $1 billion and do something with that. Sure. But to the majority of comic readers, I think both are equally foreign. And I would actually argue that the conflict with Mr. Freeze is probably more relatable to people, because the general stakes of good versus evil, someone is threatening the status quo, someone is threatening normalcy and sanity, and you've got to pull out all the stops in order to defeat this evil. That tends to be a fairly universal concept. The idea of good versus evil tends to be something people can relate to, even if they're not currently facing those exact threats in their life. It's one reason why movies, and especially the ones that do really well, it could be any kind of science fiction, action, comic book, things like Star Wars. I mean, what in Star Wars is an encounter or an event that you would have in your real life? None. However, it is the case that general concepts of good versus evil, of somebody who's out for power and control, and we've got to rebel against it. Those concepts you do have in your life. It's an allegory to those events. And what I see happening in several of these interviews, it's like we got to change the villains so the threats feel more relatable. But do you? Isn't simply the threat, if Apocalypse wants to wipe out humanity, and humanity, as it turns out, doesn't want to be wiped out, isn't that relatable enough? Granted, No weird blue and gray guy running around with tubes coming out of his arms, but the idea of survival is certainly a basic human instinct. It's a trait. I think that this logic gets used to excuse things like, hey, let's have the hero standing around and somebody comes out and shouts something racist at She-Hulk, and for some reason, because she's green, and then She-Hulk says, you shouldn't be racist, and then everybody claps. Like that's it feels like we're making an excuse to tell that story. And again, I'm not sure how relatable that story is, where basic concepts of good and evil tend to span races and genders and other things. The idea that, hey, there's this multi-universal threat that is way beyond anything we can deal with. This dude is coming to eat our planet, and we've got to somehow pull out all the stuff. Somehow through ingenuity and a little bit of luck, we have to save our place where we live so we can continue to survive as a species. I think that one most people can understand, and not relate to as in they did this last week. But that's where everybody's being a little too literal. Nobody's really wants that, do they? No, I mean, this is what this is again where I think that we overcomplicate things that are really not that complicated. I think telling a really good comic story is tough. I think getting a compelling story that will keep people coming back month after month, that builds up the characters and gives us something to think about, I think it's hard. I don't hand wave it. It's a hard job to think of stories month after month after month. But at the same time, I don't think the solution of, well, let's just have these stories be something that everyone could encounter in their daily life. I think that's neither something that is going to sell. I mean, comics are escapism to some extent. You do want to read this story about this situation that is beyond you, that exists outside of your normal world. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to buy the comic. You just go out into the world and live it, experience it. I feel like we're really close to comic books of people like having trouble getting their Zoom call working because the network is overloaded because everybody's home for COVID. I feel like there's an Avengers comic in our near future where the Avengers are trying to get to have an Avengers conference call, but none of them are. It's not working very well. Like one of them, they can't figure out how to turn their camera on, so you just get the initials there, and then they realize the person's just logged on and then basically put it on mute and went into the living room and playing video games and not even paying attention. That's Please don't make a story like that. It might seem funny in your head. It's definitely relatable, and a lot of us are putting up with that kind of stuff. But that's not what comics are for or about. And I think this trap of we have to make it relatable is just becoming, we have to tell very mundane stories. Yeah, that's my opinion anyway. What about you? Do comics have to be relatable? Do the threats and the villains and all that, do they have to be something that you encounter in your life? Does that make for a better comic? Now, there's slice of life type comics. There's romance comics that probably are able to get a lot closer to what happens in your real life. But one of the most popular, most well-selling slice of life comics there has ever been, which is Scott Pilgrim. Most of the scenarios in that comic are not ones you can experience in your life. Sorry, there's not a legion of evil boyfriends that when you kill them, they turn into coins. That doesn't actually exist. Doesn't happen. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I think this is nonsense, but it's weird and slightly spooky to me to see this continually keep coming up. Relatable plots. I mean, I don't know. Somehow, Kirby, Romita, Stan Lee, Gene Colan. I mean, you can go on and on. Lots of creators somehow figured out a way to make it work for decades, and they didn't. It was okay. It was okay to have Blastar escape from the negative zone and try and blow everything up. It worked out. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hey, like and subscribe, of course, as always, and thanks for listening.